And welcome in with the one and only Dan Harary. Really excited to speak with him today. It's going to be a really interesting discussion, and I think one that maybe you've never heard on UAP before. So, Dan, thanks for joining me, the chairman of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance and longtime Hollywood publicist. Your story and your mission is really something. So, thanks for coming on here today.
Oh, sure, Stephen. That's my pleasure, man. Thank you very much. It's always funny that I'm being interviewed in the past year because I've been a Hollywood publicist for over 40 years.
Wow.
And for all that time, over 40 years, I've been getting my clients interviewed by the media, right? In the last year, suddenly now I'm on the other side of the camera and I'm like, I'm being interviewed. And I go places now and you want my autograph? So it's very cool.
That's funny. Yeah, I guess the tables have turned a little bit.
A little
Um,
bit, just a hair, just a hair.
there's a lot that I have actually written down to get to with
Sure.
you here, Dan, and so I want to start actually with something that, well, is coming up more sooner than later, and that's Contact in the Desert. It's pretty much the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, UFO UAP conventions out there, and that's coming up next month, end of May, beginning of June. I know you're heavily involved with that. I want to start there. What can you tell us about Contact in the Desert?
Sure. Okay. So I am very fortunate to be the publicist for Contact in the Desert, May 30th through June 3rd. It's going to be it's at a beautiful resort called the Renaissance Resort in Indian Wells, California, which is near Palm Springs. In fact, I went last year for the first time. I'd heard about it for a long time, but I went last year. I was Steve Bassett's guest, and we'll talk about Steven in a minute.
Sure.
And I was like, wow, like this is way cooler than you think. Well, in the old days, Contact in the Desert used to be in the desert,
Mm,
outdoors. And that's before my time, but they had tents for panels and lectures and films during the afternoons under tents. And at night, you sit out and look at the sky. Well, Palm Springs is hot in the summer,
mm.
100 plus degree. And apparently people were just as my mother would say, they were plotzing. People were plotzing from the heat.
Yeah.
So in more recent years, it moved into the Renaissance Hotel. Now, last year, two gentlemen acquired the event. They bought it.
Mm.
And their names are Ron Janix and Gordon Peckrell. So Ron Janix and Gordon Peckrell, they bought it early 2023. So last year was their first event that they produced in conjunction with the original owner. And now this year, 2024, which was also, it's interesting, it's the 10th anniversary of the event. This summer, the
Right.
10th anniversary of the event. Ron and Gordon, this is really their coming out party. This is all them, you know. So we have 73 speakers. We have, you name it, and they're going to be there. Richard Dolan, Nick Pope, Steve Bassett, Whitley Strieber, Avi Loeb. There's so much, Carolyn Corey, Jason Martell, William Henry. It's really, if you watch Ancient Aliens, I'd say the only people missing, and we actually tried to get both of them. I joke with Ron Janix. I said, the only people missing will be Eric Von Daniken
Mm.
and Giorgio Tsoukalos. Well, Eric is 81 or 82 now.
Yeah.
And he said, thank you very much, but I can't make it. And then Giorgio, who I know, we all know Giorgio.
Sure.
He said, thank you. I appreciate it. I have other things happening. But other than them, it's pretty much a who's who. So go to contactinthedesert.com, get your tickets now. We are expecting 2,000 to 2,500 people.
Wow.
It's a 5-day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So it's I'm counting in my head, 5-day event. I personally, the first night there, the Thursday, I will be broadcasting my podcast. I have a podcast on the UnX network, which is called Live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. I go live, Stephen, every Thursday night for 1 hour.
Awesome.
So that very first Thursday, which is May 30, I will be interviewing Ron James. Do you know Ron James?
Ron James. I know the name.
Okay, so
Know the name.
you know the film Accidental Truth?
Yes.
Ron James is the filmmaker who created Accidental Truth.
Okay.
A very successful doc that came out last year. He is updating that doc So he's doing a sequel called Accidental Truth: Next.
Hmm.
So Ron James, and he happens to be my client for PR. He and I just teamed up. So I'm his publicist. But I'm going to interview Ron James. That's on the 30th. I'll be running the media room through the whole show. And we can get to this. I'm the chairman and creator of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.
Oh, we're definitely gonna get to that.
So at Contact, in addition, I really have two distinct hats, even at Contact. I will be running the press room
Right.
and the media. Concurrently, I'm the head of HDA, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We have a booth. We're going to have a booth there. And Nick Pope, Steve Bassett, Dee Wallace, and Thomas Jane, two movie stars. Dave Foley, who's a comedic TV star. Carolyn Corey, George Norrie may be there. Quite a few people are going to be at the booth. So and this is funny. The media room is upstairs. Then there's a huge staircase, and then my booth is downstairs. I will be running. I'm trying to lose weight. I'll be honest, because I'm going to be running up and down for 6 days. And
Wow.
this is a big staircase, Stephen. I'm going to be
Yeah.
going back and forth. I will be hosting the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance panel at Contact. We have a panel.
Cool.
It's basically how UFOs and ETs should be addressed in the media. I'll be the host. That's June 2nd. And on my panel is Thomas Jane, Dee Wallace, Dave Foley, Steve Bassett, and then two award-winning UFO documentary filmmakers who are good friends of mine, Serena DC and Michael Mazzola. Michael worked with Stephen Greer on many of his docs.
Hmm.
So that's June 2nd. And then on June 3rd, I'm doing a solo 90-minute lecture.
Oh, wow.
Called Why I Believe My Father Was Involved with UFOs for the Military. And that's what put me on the map. And that's a result of my book. So I'm going to be, and last thing about Contact is I went last year with Steve Bassett. I knew no one. I knew who everyone was. Nick Pope, Richard Dolan, Paul Hynek, Whitley Strieber. I knew who all these people because I've been studying this for 20 years. I've been watching every documentary. Ancient Aliens TV show is like my religion, and
Sure.
So I knew who everyone was. Not one person there knew who I was because my book had not yet come out, right? Or actually, my book had just come out, but nobody knew me or my book. And now, 1 year later, because I created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance and Steve Bassett became my best friend, everyone knows me now.
Right.
Every single person knows me now. They all know me now, and it all within a year's time. It's just kind of remarkable how that happened.
It is amazing, kind of the domino effect, and to that point, I want to get to actually something you brought up because there's a lot to touch on there. With Contact in the Desert, that lineup sounds incredible. What you guys going on? You're going to be pretty busy, it sounds like. But connected to all that is something you mentioned is the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, and that's something, like I said during the introduction, you're the chairman of. I mean, you're one of the head honchos. So when it comes to the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, just kind of explain that a little bit. What does that exactly mean? What's going on? Like, well, what is the mission with the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance?
Okay, it's a great question. It goes to my book, and we'll do the book as a separate story because it really is its own story. But
Absolutely.
my book, After They Came, it's right behind me there. After They Came was published March 1st, 2023. It's an original sci-fi novel about two benevolent aliens come to Earth to save mankind. Okay. So it came out March 1st last year. So that weekend, when it first came out, I was at Alien Con. I had a booth in Pasadena to promote my book. And at Alien Con, I gave a copy to Giorgio Tsoukalos, who I know. I gave a copy to Eric Von Daniken. I got my picture taken with Eric. He goes, "Oh, I haven't read this book yet." I go, "Eric, it came out yesterday. That's probably why you haven't seen this one yet." And I met Paul Hynek, and I met George Knapp and David Childress. And I always get Lou Elizondo and Jeremy Corbell. I always get those two mixed up for some reason. I met a lot of people there. And I was promote Paul Hynek. I promote my book. That was cool. And I just got into Ron James. I met him there too. So then 2 weeks later, last March, I'm promoting my book at UFO Con. It's a little baby convention in San Francisco, late March last year, 2023. There, I met Stephen Bassett. My brother lives in Monterey, so he met me at that event, and we watched Stephen Bassett do a lecture about disclosure, what disclosure is, hopefully what it means, what it portends for the future of mankind. That the president and a U.S. government and the military go, hey, we know all about aliens and UFOs. It's real, my little friends. This
Mm,
has been going on since, we've been known since even before Roswell. This is all true. So Steve Bassett is one of the pioneers, along with Stephen Greer, of the disclosure movement in Washington, D.C. Okay,
mm,
so now I was not familiar with the term disclosure, the movement, what it really was. I just, it was part of ufology I wasn't really aware of. Stephen spoke, and my brother and I were like, "Wow, this guy's brilliant, man! This guy knows his stuff. Listen to this. This is unbelievable." After he spoke, I saw Stephen in the restaurant. I said, "Hi, my name is Dan. I enjoyed your lecture. Here's a copy of my book as a gift." He goes, "What do you do, Dan?" I said, "I'm a publicist." He goes, "You're a publicist?"
hmm,
He goes, "I need a publicist." So he gave me his card. I gave him, we switched cards. He said, I get to LA he lives in Washington, D.C.
okay.
He said, "I get to LA every so often." And I said, "Oh, cool. Let's have lunch." I was just impressed with his knowledge. I said, "Let's have lunch." That was March. 2 months later is May last year, late May last year. He calls me, "Dan, I'm in LA." Okay, we had lunch in Hollywood at a famous Italian restaurant, and we're sharing an antipasta salad, and we're telling each other our life stories, right? Now, I knew who he was from all the documentaries, but
Right.
I didn't know him on a personal level at all. So we bonded. We had like a 2, 3 hour lunch, and we just told each other our life stories. At the end, Stephen, Stephen Bassett looked at me and said, "Dan, what can we do together?" Okay, so I looked at him, I looked up, I looked down, I go, "Stephen, we're going to create the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance."
Wow.
And he goes, "Exactly." So we shook hands. Now, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it meant. I pulled those 3 words out of the air,
Hmm,
literally out of the air, but his face lit up. He goes, "That's it exactly." So we shook hands. Okay, so that was the end of May, end of May. 4 days later last year was Contact in the Desert.
okay.
Steven said, "Dan, be my guest. Come out." And I go, "I don't want to schlep out to Palm Springs." I go, I have other things. I like relaxing on the weekends." He goes, "No, no, no. You got to go. You got to go. It's the biggest thing. You got to go." I go, "Okay." So I went out for the weekend. I stayed in we bunked in this, he had a bedroom at the hotel. So he gave me the bed there, and I was his roommate. And he introduced me to a lot of people. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, man.
Mm,
I mean, like 2,000 people, like, UFO geeks like me, who are, Richard Dolan, Nick Pope,
yeah.
with all the greatest hits, all the people, they're all talking, and Michael Stratt and Ryan Wood, and people that just know their stuff cold. And I'm like, wow, this is so impressive. And then also, this was cool. I told my mother this the other day. So when Bassett was walking through the crowds, I was walking right behind him, and I said, "Mom, it was like Moses parting the Red Sea." Because when Stephen walked, like people were parting, Steve Bassett, Steve Bassett. So like everyone is shaking his hand and taking his picture, and I'm standing behind him. I'm like,
Right.
"Wow, this guy's pretty famous in this area." He's, I'm his little protege. He's 10 years older than me.
Hmm,
So I met a lot of people there during those 2 days with Stephen. We started to promote Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. The funny thing, Stephen, is all we had were those 3 words. That's
right.
all we had. No, we didn't have a logo. We didn't have a website. We didn't have a company. We didn't have a mission statement. We had no things. We had 3 words. First person we told was George Norrie.
Hmm,
George Norrie grabbed my shoulder. He goes, "Danny, I want to be your first member."
wow.
The next person we told was Nick Pope. "Dan, I want to be a member." Then we told Richard Dolan, "Oh, yeah, I want to be a member." Okay, so By the end of that weekend, Stephen, we had the top people in the world. Katie Page from Colorado, Ron Janix, the owner of Contact in the Desert. By the end of a couple of days, we had the name of something, and we had the top people in the world who wanted to be members.
Wow.
But there was no such thing. It didn't exist. So now I come back from Contact. I go to my daughter. My daughter, Anjali, is a gifted graphic artist. I go, Anjali, I need a logo and a website right away. So last summer, she created the HDA logo, the HDA website. I wrote the mission statement. And then last fall, Stephen invited his people, colleagues, friends, peers. I invited people I know. Dee Wallace, the movie star from E.T., the mother from E.T. She's one of my best friends.
Oh, wow.
So Dee, Stephen brought in Thomas Jane, the movie star. They've been friends for 15 years. Stephen brought in Shirley MacLaine. I brought in a bunch of Hollywood producers, directors, and writers that I know. So last fall, I call it cutting and pasting. Stephen and I cut and paste together the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance last summer, last fall. November 2nd, last year, we officially launched. I represent a very famous Hollywood restaurant called Musso and Frank. It's the most famous restaurant in LA. Charlie Chaplin made them famous in the 1920s. So here we are, they were 105 years old. We launched at Musso and Frank's. Well, that was very cool. We had 50 people in the room, and we had 25 people on Zoom on day one. And the Dolans and Nick Pope and Bassett and Carolyn Corey and Chuck Zukowski and more people than I can. Thomas Jane was there. More people than I can remember. And that's when we launched. And we got quite a bit of press. We've gotten, not a ton, but we've gotten some very nice press. Now, where we're at is we have about 150 members. Now, here, let me tell you what I haven't said yet is what HDA does.
Sure.
The goal, and my mother asked me again. I talk to my mother every Sunday. What does the HDA do? Every Sunday, I talk to her. Stephen and I said, let's create a networking group. Think of it as this. I told my mother, think of it as Match.com. Half of our members are UFO researchers, experiencers, and disclosure advocates like Stephen. The other half are Hollywood producers, writers, directors, and performers. And when I say Hollywood, I mean the global entertainment industry. The word Hollywood is a sexier, better word, but it means the entertainment industry.
Right.
So half of our members are UAP researchers, and half are Hollywood producers, writers, directors, behind the scenes talent. And it's a networking group to promote the next era of feature films, TV shows, and documentaries, and even books. I'm hoping to influence books. And the idea is to cross-pollinate these are two disparate groups of people. Other than like Spielberg or J.J. Abrams or James Cameron or M. Night Shyamalan, there's only been a few major Hollywood directors that really try to blend the UFO world and the Hollywood world. Very few. Very few. In fact, I've invited all of them. Spielberg's lawyer goes, "Oh, Dan, he knows all about it. He's too busy." Well, that would have been nice. J.J. Abrams, secretary, Dan, good luck. JJ says good luck with your HDA. Oh, that's nice. Would have been nice if they joined.
Right.
They didn't join. Would have been nice.
Not yet.
Would have been nice. We've been trying to get Danny Aykroyd for a year. I'll tell you that. He's big into it.
He is big into it.
He knows all about us. Oh, he's too busy. He's too busy. Which is really surprising for Dan Aykroyd. We really thought we'd had him. So the the bottom line is HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org is the website, .org. We became recently a 501c3 nonprofit corporation because we are trying to promote the cause of disclosure across the media. We're not for profit. We don't make any money. We are seeking donations. so we can do live events. We did one live event a month ago, Stephen. It was very cool in North Hollywood. We did the making of Project Blue Book, the TV series,
Oh, cool.
and we had Paul Hynek and his brother Joel Hynek,
Wow.
and their father was Dr. J. Allen Hynek. So they talked about who their father was. And then the three producers and creators of that show spoke about what Project Blue Book was and how they translated it to TV. And we had 75 people there. And Danny Sheehan, the famous attorney, was there. He was the special guest. So that was fantastic. It was a home run. It was an unbelievable home run. But I paid for that. I paid for that out of my pocket.
Wow.
And I said to everyone, I said, look, this is great. I'm not paying for any more of these. I did one and I'm done. And we need donations now. It's time to get donations.
Hmm.
So my daughter created a donate page on the website. And anyone out there, please check out HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. Check out the donate button. $5, $5 million, anything in between, whatever you can afford, because we are trying to do regular events. We want to do a regular newsletter. We have a Slack channel for our members, and that's very robust. They all talk to each other and say, hey, I'm in this documentary. Hey, I'll be speaking at this event. Hey, I just wrote a new book. It's really cool how the cross-pollination has been happening in the Slack channel for HDA. So that's where we're at now. Our big coming out party will be at Contact in the Desert. We have the HDA booth with a lot of famous people are going to be signing autographs at the booth. And then we have the HDA panel, which I'll be moderating. So if anyone comes out to Contact in the Desert between the HDA booth and the media press room, you'll find me. I'll be running up and down like an idiot.
I'm sure. No, it's really great stuff, Dan, because it's something that's important when it comes to all the different avenues that we can use to try to get this message out there, right? Which, look, it's in the name, Hollywood Disclosure. So it's the message of
Exactly.
disclosure when it comes to this conversation of UAP and other life on other planets or whatever it might be, multidimensional. I know all the different theories and such. So to have the backing of yourself and other big names and names within Hollywood is a really important thing, because it really does help to further the disclosure conversation. And that's what you guys are really trying to do.
Exactly right. Exactly right. In the last year, my members, I'm very close to my members, like my children. But hey, Dan, Keanu Reeves is into UFOs. Hey, Dan, Goldie Hawn had a ET experience. So if you Google this, just to anyone out there listening or watching, if you Google Hollywood celebrities, aliens, UFOs, there's probably 50 people.
It's incredible, actually, because I wanted to ask you about that with some of the names. That perfect example you're talking about, maybe people like Kurt Russell, who
Exactly.
came
Yes.
out on, I think it was the Jimmy Kimmel show some years ago, talked about
He saw the Phoenix Lights.
Phoenix Lights.
He saw it in a plane. He was in a plane when it happened. It's unbelievable.
And you have some stories like that where, and I was going to say, have you heard of this? But I'm sure you have. Jackie Gleason was
I know
very
that.
much
I know it
into
well. I
conversation,
know it well. Yeah,
and
I
the
know
story
it.
of him and Richard Nixon.
Well, I have, not only do I know that story, my father and I used to watch Jackie Gleason together and laugh hysterically.
Oh,
B, and we'll get to my father. But when I was writing I'm jumping ahead, okay? When I was writing my book, it was shortly after my father passed away. And my father worked for the U.S. Army for 45 years as an electronics engineer, and he created missiles and radar systems. So everything my father did for the Army had to do with the sky. So after my dad passed and I'm writing my book, I called my mother. I said, did Dad ever talk about UFOs or aliens? She said, listen to this story. I never heard this story in my life until after he died. He died in 2017. My mother said, in the early 1950s, your father was taken deep into the vaults at Fort Monmouth Army Base. Deep into the vaults. And they showed him something above top secret. And he came home. He was pale and shaking and nervous and sweating. And my mother said, honey, what's wrong? And my father said to my mother, this is probably 1952, I saw something today I can never tell you about. as long as I live.
Huh.
And my father never did.
Wow.
And my mother said, your father was never the same after that day.
Wow.
So let's compare my father's story to the Jackie Gleason's. Jackie Gleason was very upset.
Yes, that's right.
His wife said he was very, very upset for many, many days. Nixon showed him dead alien bodies, apparently, at a army base in Florida.
Right.
Well, I'm convinced either my dad saw a UFO craft or a chunk of technology, and we can get into that later, of a UFO craft, or he saw an alien body, or he saw some proof. I know this in my heart. It's the only explanation. He had to have seen some proof of extraterrestrial life. And my mother said, your father was never the same again. And Stephen, I never knew that story my whole life until after my father passed away. So that's
Wow.
a pretty intense thing, man.
That is incredible. Honestly, I'm not saying this just for the show or to exaggerate, Dan. I'm telling you the truth right now. I wish you could see over the camera. I got chills when you said that because not only is that an incredible experience to hear about, but also, like you said, that almost was identical to what Jackie Gleason's widow had said when he came back from his visit with, then President Nixon,
Right.
at the homestead base down, like you said, down in South Florida. That's that just blew my mind. So, and that's only 5 years after Roswell. You're talking about with 1952. So this
Let's
is
say 50,
new.
yeah. A couple of years out, yeah. Let's say 52. She said early 50s. He started in 51. Let's go with 52. Yeah,
That's
5 years after 6 years after Roswell? So, yeah, it's a
that's
very comparable story. It really is, and my mother never knew anything about the Jackie Gleason. She didn't my mother is not a bullshit artist. She doesn't make stuff up. She told me a story I had never heard in my entire life until I asked her, "Did Dad ever talk about UFOs?"
that's something. Well, and actually, I wanted to ask you about your book, so maybe that's a good segue. Is that what led you? Was that your inspiration into writing your books and how pretty much all this came about? It was kind of like a domino effect after that, right?
Exactly correct. Well, I have 2 books that are prominent, and they're behind me. One is called Flirting with Fame. A Hollywood publicist recalls 50 years of celebrity close encounters. That's my first baby.
That's fantastic.
This is my Hollywood career. It had nothing to do with aliens and UFOs, but this is me. I worked with Bruce Springsteen when I was 16 years old,
Wow.
before he was famous. I knew Jerry Seinfeld before he was famous. I went to college with Howard Stern
Oh,
before he was famous. I worked with Brooke Shields before she was famous. I have stories and stories and stories. So I've been in the entertainment world since I'm 15 years old, really. So I've met hundreds of celebrities. I have great photos of me in there. Jerry Seinfeld, Spielberg, Mel Brooks, Alice Cooper, I was the first publicist for the Playboy Channel. I worked for Hugh Hefner for 2
wow.
years, and I had just gotten married, so my wife wasn't very happy about that.
Well, it was just for the articles, right, Dan? You were just that's all it
Right.
was.
Yeah, yeah, my wife was not happy about that at all. I worked with Gilligan and the Skipper. I worked with Steve Allen and Milton Berle and Sid Caesar and Bob
Mm,
Hope. I mean, the stories are endless. So that's that book. Okay, now we come to the gold, Stephen. Now we're gonna come to the gold. Ready? Here we
let's do
go.
it.
Here we go. My parents were from Brooklyn. They married in 52 in Brooklyn and moved down to the Jersey Shore, the Jersey near Asbury Park, New Jersey. Um, I grew up just outside Asbury Park, New Jersey. Everyone who knows the Bruce Springsteen story, that's where he's from. My friends and I knew him. He was a bar band, 7 years older than me. Uh, I worked with him in '73 before he was famous. There's all kinds, endless Bruce stories. There's all kinds of Bruce stories.
Hmm.
Anyway, so my dad worked for Fort Monmouth Army Base, Belmar, New Jersey, which is just adjacent to Asbury Park. And that's where he worked. So one day, here's where the story starts. March 1970, I was almost 14 years old, not quite 14. My father picked me up one day from school and drove me home. I'm in my father's car. We're in suburban New Jersey on my street where I grew up. It's about 3 in the afternoon. It's daylight. As we're driving together, I look through the windshield of my father's car, and above in the sky was a huge silver V, letter V like Victor, craft, hovering in the sky, hovering silently, not moving above my father's car. I go, Dad, stop the car. Stop the car. There's a UFO. Dad, there's a UFO. Stop the car. Stop. I'm jumping in the seat like this.
Hmm.
He stopped the car. He pulled the car over to the side. We got out. We stood in front of the car. And Steven, I'm telling you the God's honest truth. Dad, look. Isn't this great? Look at that. Oh my God, Dad. Now, this thing is like, imagine like one of the pyramids of Egypt is hovering over your father's car.
Wow.
I mean, it was huge. Like each wing was probably the size of 2 school buses. Shiny silver, V like Victor, no smoke, no propellers, no sound of any kind, hovering like a butterfly above my father's car.
Hmm.
Now, if Stephen, if that was you, me, or you, and any other people on the planet, we would have been jumping up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, this is so good because it's right there. It's not even moving. It's just hovering like a private show.
And this was during the day.
3:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
March 1970. I remember the date, and I'll tell you why I remember the date later because it's kind of funny. So I'm freaking out. My father, Stephen, looked at this thing like this.
Just
And he's looking at his watch. Then he's looking at his car. He's looking at his socks.
just
No interest of any kind.
wow.
Zero. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't interested. He wasn't shocked. Nothing. Zero. Okay.
Hmm.
You and I would have had we would have been like tear, like we hugging, like Stephen,
Sure.
can you believe we saw one? We saw one. Okay. So that's like 2 minutes of that, right? Then my father looks at me, he goes, Danny, come on, let's go home. Okay. Get in the car. Now, we do remember this. More recently, I remember this. As we were driving a few blocks to our house, the craft followed us for a little bit, and then it sped up and went over my neighborhood and disappeared.
Hmm.
Go to my house. March 1970, rotary phone.
Nice.
Rotary phone. If anyone even knows what that was, I call in the kitchen. I call the Asbury Park Press newspaper. Hi, my name is Danny. I'm almost 14 years old. My dad and I just saw a UFO in the sky. It was a big, giant silver V in the sky. And the lady said to me, Stephen, she goes, Sonny, I can't talk to you right now. I'm getting hundreds of phone calls about this.
Oh, wow.
I got to go. I'm really sorry. I got to go. And she hung up on me. I remember it clear as day, clear as day. I looked in the paper every day that week for an article. No article ever ran. Nothing ever ran. Okay. I forgot that happened for 47 years. Completely and totally forgot that happened my entire life, 47 years. Okay. And also, let me tell you how I remember the date, March 1970. The next day, my dad took me to the record store, and I bought the Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsies album, which was brand new. And that came out in March 1970. That's how I remember the date.
Nice.
Okay. Now I have other elements of the story, and then I'll get to the climax of the story. That's 1970. My next adventure is 1996, 26 years later. I'm now in LA for years. I'm married. I'm divorced. I have 2 kids. My ex-wife moved out to Lancaster, California after our divorce, near Edwards Air Force Base. My son turned, I always do this wrong. My son turned 8. My son was 8. My daughter was 6. And I used to visit them every weekend as a divorced father to hang with my kids. And that was Lancaster from LA, where I live, is far. It's like almost 3 hours each way. So I would spend the weekends with my children. My son was 8, May 1996. He wanted a telescope for his birthday. Got him a telescope, brought it out. He's in his pajamas. We go outside at night on his birthday, May 10th, 1996. We're looking up at the sky, and this with the telescope. And you see the moon, and you see Saturn, and you see Mars, and all the great stuff you see with a telescope. And we had a wonderful time. As we were going to go back in the house, I saw in the far right-hand corner of the sky a off-white, yellowish off-white colored, oh, like an egg. I always forget the shape of it. It was like an egg. Suddenly lit up, and it started to travel very fast, but visibly in a straight line all the way across the sky. The sky.
Hmm.
And I said, Jordan, look, a satellite. Isn't that cool? There's a satellite. You didn't need the telescope. You saw it with the naked eye. There's a satellite, right? And then here's where the story gets interesting. Goes across the sky. It stopped, Stephen. It stopped in the sky in place for 30 seconds.
Hmm.
I'm like, oh my God, that satellite's going to plummet to Earth. Something happened. Something went wrong, clearly, right? Something is terribly wrong.
It's not a normal sight. Yeah.
After 30 seconds in the one spot, it reversed course and it went all the way back where it came from.
Hmm.
Well, that's not a satellite, my friends.
Right.
That's not a missile. That's not a comet, asteroid, airplane, helicopter. There's only two things it could have been: a drone or a drone, an extraterrestrial craft, or a man-made military craft. Those are the only things it could have been. So I've told that story all over the world. Jimmy Church, do you know who Jimmy Church is?
Not exactly. I recognize the name though.
Jimmy Church is like George Norrie Jr.
Okay.
He has a very, very successful show called Fade to Black.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
Okay. And I told that story. Now, Jimmy lives out there. And Jimmy said, Dan, you were near Edwards Air Force Base. That was a military UFO. He goes, clearly, I know it was. He goes, and I said, you know what, Jimmy, I think you're right. I think you're right. They were testing something.
Yeah.
Stephen, when it stopped in place, they're probably like, Bill, we need a little more tweak over here, a little more yaw, and a little more roll, and let's adjust those lights, and yeah, let's go back. I'm hungry. Let's get a hot dog. So then they went back. I mean, it was like they stopped for a reason. They were adjusting their. So I said, Jimmy, I think you're right. I think that was a man-made UFO. Okay.
And that's what I find so interesting about both of those stories, Dan, if I may, when it comes to the details that you give, because what I find striking is the details that you gave. They were, everything. You gave exact details of times and dates, and whether you were 10 or your son was 8, you could remember it all. And I say that because there's many times where I get messages from different listeners, which I always appreciate, where they send me their own personal stories. And every single time, the one common denominator that I've seen, it could be somebody from Spain who writes me, or from California or Florida, and I've had all three. Every single time, their exact details. Everybody gives the dates, the locations, just, minute details about what the weather was like. Every little thing, they can get down to every little aspect of the story. And that's exactly what you did with both stories. So I've always found striking when you have people who can relate their experiences, because it's real, and it's real. It was very real to you and to anybody who else who has a story like that, because they can recall every little thing about it, and that, and it sits with you, and it resonates. So to hear that you're able to go through all those details, that's good stuff, man.
That's great. A couple of things. One is I'm a natural born storyteller. I've always been. I've always been, even when I was a child. Two, this is interesting. I saw a UFO with my dad in 1970.
Right.
26 years later, I saw a UFO with my son. Now, I didn't realize that until one of my podcast interviews last year. Someone said, you father son. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. And also,
Okay.
you almost like the exact thing about the Phoenix Lights. We mentioned that earlier, Kurt Russell, where he called that in. He was one of the first people, if not the first person, to call it in while he was in the air flying. And you saw basically the same craft. I mean, the way you described it.
No. I think and I interviewed Lynn Kitai a few weeks ago. No, that was a huge, 2-mile, whatever, a football.
So Phoenix was bigger.
Oh, Phoenix Lights was an enormous, maybe a triangle, maybe a V, but enormous, far larger than either of the two I've told you so far. No, that was a much bigger event. But also to mention, back to your point, I was 7 when JFK was killed. I was 7. I
Hmm.
remember I was in a shoe store with my mother. We heard it on the radio. So I guess when you have a UFO experience, it's seared into your brain, right? That's to your point exactly. Okay, let me tell you the rest of the stories.
Yes, go ahead.
So we had 1970, we have 1996. Now we jump way ahead in time to 2007. I went to a bookstore to kill some time. I was waiting for a friend to see a movie. He was late. So I went into a bookstore to kill some time. And I saw a paranormal books aisle. Now, this is 2007, and however old I was, I can't remember. And I went in there and I'm like, paranormal books? What the hell is that? I'd never in my life, I didn't know what that was.
Hmm.
And there's books, Eric von Daniken's books, Richard Dolan's books, Betty and Barney Hill by Kathy Martin and Stanton Friedman,
Amazing story.
Zechariah Sitchin, Genesis Revisited.
Hmm.
Book after, crop circles, Bigfoot, ghosts, witches, whatever, everything, how the pyramids were built. I'm like, wow, this is great. I'd never seen it in my entire life.
Hmm.
I bought 12 books that day.
Wow.
Bought 12 books, carried them, went home, read all of the books. As I was reading those books, I learned about MUFON.
Hmm.
Okay. I did not know about MUFON. 2007, I read the books, saw MUFON, looked it up. I said, I got to join that. MUFON LA, now it's called MUFON Southern California, but I joined MUFON LA in the year 2007. And we had monthly meetings in North Hollywood. My very first meeting, Stephen, was Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Oh, wow.
The first meeting I ever went to, Giorgio, the legend, at the time was not famous. This is 07. This is 2 years before the Ancient Aliens TV show. Okay.
Hmm.
So he's not famous. And he's up there. Now, he's Eric Von Daniken's mentee. Everyone who knows that. He was telling us about ancient astronaut theory for 90 minutes. Stephen, I'm like this.
Right. Captivated.
I'm like, and he's showing the pyramids, the crop circles, Nazca lines, cave paintings, petroglyphs, Betty and Barney, Travis Walton, Roswell, the greatest hits, man. He's doing with slides and video. I'm like, I literally, like there's tears. I'm like, oh my God, where has all this information been my whole life?
Hmm.
You know, I must have been. I guess I was 51. I was 51 years old. I think. I can't do the math. Um, Fascinating. 90 minutes by Giorgio with the hair before
Yeah.
he's famous. Before he's famous. At the end, I go, Giorgio, that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. I shook his hand. I said, you literally just changed my entire view of the world.
Hmm.
And he said, cool, man. That's cool. Okay, terrific. 1 year later, 2008, I went to another MUFON meeting. Do you know the name James Gilliland?
Yeah, another one that sounds familiar.
Have you heard of the ESETI Ranch?
Yes.
Okay. In '08, summer, probably May or June, '08 was James Gilliland, and he was the guest speaker. I had a girlfriend named Barbara at the time. She was a TV writer. We went together. He spoke about his ESETI, ECETI ranch. It's, I don't know, 150 acres maybe. It's in Washington State at the base of Mount Adams. And he said, my ranch is a world famous UFO hotspot.
Hmm.
And he showed, Stephen, he showed videos and still pictures of UFOs that you just you can't even believe. One after the next. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, Barbara, we have to go there. Please, can we go there? Please, can we go there? He had a 3-day open house at his property. It was July 4th weekend, 2008. I believe it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I talked to this poor girlfriend. I talked her into going with me. We went and stayed up there in Washington State at the base of Mount Adams. Now, Kenneth Arnold saw his UFOs at Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is one mountain up, and the next mountain, I think south or east. The next mountain down is Mount Adams.
Okay.
So it's the same mountain range that Kenneth Arnold, right? Same mountain range. We went up there during the days. James had a large white tent set up on his property, and Nick Pope, I think, spoke. William Henry spoke. They showed films. They showed slides. They showed panels. They had lectures, orbs and pyramids and ancient alien theory, all the great stuff during the days. And at nights, they built a bonfire on the field. His property was his house where he lived, James. He lived. Then it was a tent. Then there's 150 acres of nothing, absolutely nothing. And then there's Mount Adams. So they built a bonfire. And at night, people would play guitars and tambourines and sing and dance around the bonfire. Okay, so the first day, Friday, you see the lectures and the films and the seminars. Friday night, you go with the fire, the singing, the dancing, and you're looking up at the sky to sky watch.
Yeah.
Hours and hours and hours, absolutely nothing. And after a while, your neck hurts when you're the next day, Saturday, lectures, film, slides, Nick Pope, whoever it was, I can't remember. Bonfire at night, guitars, tambourine, girls dancing and singing, all that stuff. Look up hours and hours. And I had a heavy video camera on my, it wasn't a little one. I had a heavy VHS camera on my shoulder. Look up, no, absolutely nothing for hours. And I'm like, oh man, this is a joke. It's a joke. Third and final day was a Sunday, lectures, film, seminars under the tent, the fire, dancing, singing. You're looking up hours and hours, nothing. The last night was Sunday. Okay, Stephen, here's the best part of the story. After like 2 hours, I go, I put my hand in my pocket. I pulled out my car keys. I go, Barbara, if we leave right now, we can beat the rush. There's about 250 people there. There's a lot of cars.
Wow.
On the property. I go, if we leave right now, we can beat the traffic.
Right.
The second I said that, Stephen, a black craft from nowhere slowly hovered above the 250 of us with the bonfire. It just hovered and then it stopped directly over us. It hovered, just stopped 200-300 feet in the air. I couldn't tell you the size or the shape. I wish I could. It was black against the black sky. So I just don't, it could have been huge. It could have been small. I really don't remember. And I really wish I did. But you look up and you go, okay, what the hell is that? Right. So it's hovering for like 20 seconds. We're all looking up. You're like in the X-Files when everyone's looking straight up. Now, underneath this craft was a glass, I'd call it a glass crystal bulb. And it lit up, a large glass crystal bulb, like from a chandelier maybe, and it lit up bright, beautiful, deep emerald green color light in the bulb itself. And you go, okay, that's cool. Then the light from the bulb dispersed over all of us, bathed all of us, 250 people around the fire, bathed us in green light. And it was like, da, da, da,
It was like Morse code type of.
It was like Morse code. Now there were no sound of any kind, but it was like
just flashing.
Flat. It was like messages that were being sent. I'm looking up now. I'm crying. Okay, I'm crying. I'm like, oh my God, they're real. That's what I said to my. Oh my God, they're real. That's not. There's no humans up there. That's not humans. That's not a Chinese weather balloon.
Yeah.
Okay. The message I got from the light was, hello, we're here. We're sorry we kept you waiting. You've been waiting for us for 3 days. We were late. Here we are. We love you. Don't be afraid. Everything's cool. Be kind to one another. Be good to planet Earth. And we'll see you another time. And be kind to each other. Okay? So, I mean, it flashed on and off quite a few times. Then the light stopped. Then it went off, turned off, and then the craft slowly hovered away. And then, bang, it vanished over Mount Adams. Vanished. Well, we were all crying. I mean, we're crying. We're hugging and kissing. And like, oh, my God. Wow. No, that was 2008. I can feel it today in my heart. Where's my heart? Right there. I can still, honest to God, I can still feel it right here, the messaging that I got. It went right into here. And since that day, I became a nicer person. I actually became a much nicer person after that day.
Well, you're a very nice guy, I can say that. So it's,
Well, I was a little bit more of a prick before that, I think, a little bit more cocky, but it softened me. It really did. It softened me. That was '08.
that's incredible. I mean, it's a profound experience. It was that a you felt was a telepathic message you were receiving through the light flashes? How do you take that? How do you feel that you were receiving that message?
That's a great question. It wasn't telepathic because it was straight to my heart.
Okay.
It wasn't like I'm thinking their messages. I was like experiencing their kindness and their warmth.
You could feel it.
Okay. It wasn't brain, it was heart. Honest to God, it was heart because I still can feel it, Stephen. I could feel it right now.
Wow.
Still. Okay. That's '08. Now we get to the killer parts of my story. 2017. Okay. My father died. Second wife, he was in Florida. He had Alzheimer's at the end of his life, didn't know me or my brothers. He had no idea who he was. It was very sad. He did not have a good end.
Mm.
He died in Florida. His wife called me, your father's gone. I'm like, wow. So a couple days later, April 2017, I went to a deli here in LA. I went to a deli to get a pastrami sandwich and to think about my dad and just to be sad about my dad. Okay. And this is going to sound, every time I tell the story, I can't believe it because it's so remarkable. But everything I'm going to tell you now is true. Went to the deli. It was empty. Ordered a pastrami sandwich from the waiter. He walks away. I'm sitting there, Stephen, at the table, thinking about my dad. A beam of light or energy or something from above, beam, bang, into my head like this. Bang, right side of my head, really hard. Bang. And then through my brain, through my eyes, into the air, about 10 inches in front of me, projected in the air was a hologram home movie of the 1970 UFO sighting I had with my father.
Wow.
I'm watching it 47 years later.
Again, you gave me chills. Look at this.
I swear to you, I swear to my daughter, what I'm telling you is true, man. I could not. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm watching it. It's projected in the air, right? And I see, now here's what's cool. I see my father's car. I see me and my dad, and I see the craft. And it was like God was the cameraman because, like, whoever is the cameraman, it wasn't from my point of view. It was like from someone that was taking a whole movie 20 feet away. Okay. So the
Wow.
point of view was like 20 feet away. Let's call it God's camera.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my God, I forgot all about that event. At the end of this event, and I'm jumping up, I'm seeing me jump up and down. I'm seeing my dad looking at the craft board. At the end of this thing, my dad looked at me and he winked, Stephen. He winked, winked. And then he said, kid, let's go home. Or let's go home, kid. And he winked. Now, then it went off. It just stopped. It was 30, 40 seconds, gone. So I had to talk about chills, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? Then little voice, get a pen, get a pen, get a pen. So I went to the waiter. I said, excuse me, sir, can I have a pen? Waiter gives me a pen. On the table in front of me was a paper placemat. My hand, not me, my
Hmm.
hand with the pen wrote, write a book about benevolent aliens. Lead character's father knew about UFOs. And then I wrote capital A, capital T, capital C, and my hand stopped moving.
Hmm.
So, Stephen, I'm like, what the hell is going on? I just want a pastrami sandwich. I'm looking at this paper. I'm like, what the hell is ATC? Well, aliens, benevolent aliens. So aliens come, they came, aliens, they come after they came. So that's how I got my book.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible, Dan.
My book was given to me as a gift from above. Honest to God, it was. Now, Steve Bassett thinks it was an ET download, but I said, Stephen, that I think it was my father.
I was just gonna ask you that if you don't mind me jumping in. I was just about to say,
Please.
do you feel like that was, pretty much that scenario? Steve Bassett says, well, that was, ET intervention. I was going to ask you, do you feel like that was the case, or do you feel like that was a gift from your father saying, remember this and write about it?
Exactly. I strongly lean toward, and I've told this story all over the world. I believe it was my father. And again, a couple things. It was 3 days after he died.
Mm,
I went to think about my dad and be alone, and this event happened. Now, now we have to talk about who my dad was, which I didn't know until after he died. I didn't know who my father was. My father worked for the U.S. Army from 1951 to 1996, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey Army bases. He was at the same base the whole time. He was an electronics engineer and a physicist. He was a genius. My father was a genius. He I know he worked on missiles and radar. That he always, it was one of the few things he ever told any of us, my mother or my two brothers. When I was a little kid, I'd say, Dad, what do you do for a living? He goes, I help America win the Cold War. That's all he ever said. He never, ever talked about his work.
hmm.
Okay, so after he died, I spoke to my mother, and that's the story about what he was shown in the vault, right? He's shown something in the vault. I found a newsletter, Stephen, after he died that profiled my father. I had it in my scrapbook for 40 years. I didn't know I had it. My father helped invent military drones.
Mm,
My father helped to invent, think about this, military drones. That's
my
very
goodness.
important. Okay. So once I saw that, I go, Mom, Dad invented military drones. She said, he used to go. I remember when I was little, my dad was always at the Pentagon. So I remember because he gave talks at the Pentagon quite often. My mother said, your father used to go to White Sands Missile Testing Range all the time. I go, really? He did? I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that. Um, let's see, what else? He once did tell me, out of nowhere, I was probably 12. He goes, Daddy, I helped invent drones. I'm like, okay, Dad, can we get some ice cream? I really, what are you talking about? Drones? I don't know what he's talking about. Okay. In Richard Dolan's book, UFOs in the National Security State, there's an appendix at the end of the book. It has major UFO sightings above military bases. One happened in 51, one happened in 52, above Fort Monmouth, New Jersey,
Mm,
right when my dad started working there. Okay. Now, here comes the best part of all. Last June, Stephen Greer did a three hour talk at the Washington Press Club. It's
I was
on
there.
you. You were there?
I was there. Yes.
Okay, so maybe you'll remember. One of the slides Stephen Greer showed was a slide of 145 U.S. military bases that he has proof of through whistleblowers that worked on reverse engineering of retrieved UFO vehicles, 145 military bases. My father's workplace, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, is number 51 on that list, on that chart.
Hmm.
I found that. I saw that. When I saw that, I said, okay, now I know. In fact, I blew up that chart and I mailed it to my mother, and she goes, oh my God, Danny, I think you're right. So let's review. My dad was a genius engineer, worked for the Army for 45 years, top secret, spoke at the Pentagon all the time, went to White Sands all the time. He's on Fort Monmouth is on Stephen Greer's reverse engineered list. There were two major UFO sightings above Fort Monmouth in Richard Dolan's book. My mother said he saw something above top secret that blew his mind. And my father and I saw a UFO together. If I was with any other person on the planet except my father, we would have been jumping up and down, either scared or excited. My dad had no reaction, and he winked at me. Okay. What does all this mean? My dad knew what that thing was.
Mm-hmm.
My father knew what that silver V was in 1970. I know it in my heart. I know it to be true. Now, I believe it was a military man-made drone using reverse engineered alien technology. I can't swear to it because he's dead and I'll never know. But I'm telling you, in my gut, and my research, and I've told this story all over the world, and everyone said, Dan, yeah, your dad knew what that was. Paul Hynek said, yeah, Dad, of course your father knew what that was. So that's my story. That's how I got my book. That's how I created Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. That's how I became the publicist for Contact in the Desert, because I went for a pastrami sandwich after my father died. Everything changed.
Just unbelievable, Dan. I know. Gosh, I could probably go with you for another hour, but I know you don't have much time left. So maybe if you're okay with it, we can do this another time, and get back together. But I got to ask this question, and maybe it's way off base, but it popped into my head, so I just got to throw it out there. I wonder if you ever thought about. Do you feel like that was something your father almost orchestrated for you to see on the way home?
Wow. That's the great, no one ever, that's a fantastic question. Stephen, I have been thinking lately, why would a major UFO hover above my father's car?
Do you think that's a gift he gave you? He wanted to
I,
show you, but without actually telling you?
oh my God, now I have chills, honest to God, I have chills.
The question has popped into my head. I'm like, I have to ask this before we go.
I have the chills. It seemed to me almost like his coworkers at Fort Monmouth were playing a joke on him. Like, let's show Jack our latest, model of V, Silver V, and let's fly it over where he lives in his streets so he can get a kick out of it. It's almost like it was done for my father. I don't think it was done for me, to be honest. I think it was done for him. But if that's the case, well, after he died from heaven, he sent me that hologram.
Right.
My father sent me the home movie of that event,
That
eh,
specific experience, yeah.
of that moment in time. I mean, my dad passed when I don't remember how old, 60 something. And in all the years, and we were super close, he played me a 40-second video from heaven of that moment. I believe my father from heaven, here's what he was saying. He said, Danny, I couldn't tell you what I did for a living when I was alive, but I'm dead now. My NDAs with the government are done. I'm not jeopardizing my pension at this point. I'm dead. I want you to see what I did for a living. You and I shared a moment, and now I can tell you. Honest to God, I think he shared that event with me from beyond the grave.
It's incredible. Man, well, Dan, we've got to cover a lot of bases here today, even some that I didn't even expect to cover. So it's been absolutely fascinating. How much of this stuff before we go, how much of this conversation is spoken about behind the scenes in Hollywood, and they just don't want to? Maybe you have celebrities, of course, not the ones who are involved with the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, but other celebrities who feel embarrassed because maybe there's still some type of stigma and they don't want to talk about it. But like, how much of this is spoken about behind the scenes? It just doesn't come out.
Well, again, when I created HDA a year ago, I wrote to Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell, Tom Cruise, Spielberg, Keanu Reeves, Demi Lovato has
Yeah.
had all kinds of experiences. What's her name? Miley Cyrus.
Mm.
If anyone Googles celebrity UFO encounters, there's many of the very, very famous people.
Elvis was a
I
big one.
Elvis, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan saw it too. Do you know the story about John Lennon, by the way?
I don't think I do.
John Lennon saw one when he was living in New York he was with May Pang at the time, and one went by his like hovered outside his window for a moment. I think it was red. So John Lennon saw one. Anyway,
Hmm.
I've to answer your question in my way, I've invited all of these people into my group. I'm like, hey, you're Fran Drescher. Fran Drescher has been abducted.
Wow.
All of them. If you name them, I've written to them through their publicist or their agent, their manager, or their lawyer. All of them. We'd love to invite you. You're one of us. Oh, Fran Drescher's too busy. She can't. She thanked. Good luck. I wrote to William Shatner, Kirk. He wrote back, Dan, best sounds fascinating. I'm too busy. Best of luck to you. So these people, some of them go on the record to talk about it. They don't want to they don't want to join my group.
Mm.
I don't know why. But if you Google celebrities and aliens, there's quite a few people that have gone on the record. You'd think they'd all be jumping up and down for my group.
It's
but
really interesting.
maybe we did get Shirley MacLaine more recently, so maybe slowly but surely they'll be joining.
Well, I have a feeling this is going to continue to grow, and it's a movement that is only gaining steam over the past, few years. And I will say too, I actually haven't announced this yet, and I'll say this as we head out. I have joined the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.
Yes, you have.
Not
You're
that
up
I'm
there.
famous by any means, but I guess maybe to some. But I've been honored through your invitation, Dan, to join the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance under the UAP ET section. So thank you for that. And that's the first time I put that out there, actually.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We're trying to embrace like-minded people who have experiences or interest. And listen, I'll be honest. I get emails, Stephen, every week. My husband is Bigfoot, and I had babies on Mars, and now I live in Atlantis. I'm like, okay, good. Good for you. I wish you all the best. Can't quite put you into the group. I mean, I get you. I should just collect the wackadoodle emails, because some of the wackadoodles are just Jesus and Satan were aliens and from planet Quicknarg, and I'm, oh really, Quicknarg. So you have to draw the line. But someone like you, of course, I'm going to put you into the HDA. And if you have colleagues, friends, peers you want, also if you want to interview the people at HDA, just look at the members and say, Dan, can I get Steve Bassett? Can I get whoever? I'll hook you up, man.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'll probably take you up on that, because you have a lot of really great names on there who have joined this group. So that's great, Dan. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. This was really fun. I really appreciate it. On June 10th, I have 2 new books coming out, believe it or not.
Yeah, I
2
was
new
about to
books.
say, give us your
The same
closing
day.
here.
All right, here's the close. Here's my close. Buy your tickets for contactinthedesert.com, contactinthedesert.com. Get your tickets now. They're going fast. You don't want to miss it if you're able to go. Check out HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. If you want to join, it tells you how. Please consider donating so we can move this ball forward. We want to get 200 members by the end of the year. We want to do live events. I want to do an annual awards event, Stephen. I told Paul Hynek, I said, I want to create the J. Allen Hynek annual award for excellence in ufology. The J. Allen Hynek Award. We could call it the Heine. It would be the Heine. Isn't that great? The Heine. And Paul goes, yeah, love to do that. Let's do that. So I want to create the Heine Award. I need money. I mean, we need donation. I can't do all this by myself.
Yeah.
Dan Harary, author, AUTHOR.com is me, my bio, my books, me with Spielberg and Jerry Seinfeld and Alice Cooper and Hugh Hefner and Kirsten Dunst and Gilligan and the Skipper. All my fun photos are up there. June 10th, I have 2 brand new books coming out the same day by 2 different publishers by pure coincidence.
Wow.
One is called My Paranormal Life. Supernatural stories from a Hollywood insider. That's my ghosts. And we could do this another time, Stephen, but after my dad passed, in addition to the deli, he came into my bedroom 4 times to speak to me.
Oh, wow.
His ghost was very active in my bedroom after my dad died. My grandfather was a poltergeist in my house 20 years ago. That's another remark. I have stories upon stories upon stories. So that's my paranormal life. My other book is called 5. It's about it's fiction. It's a serial killer who gets reincarnated over and over again throughout time. Originally, his name is Fievel. He's an actor in 1870s Europe. He's a famous actor, Fievel, and he kills women in his off time. He kills women, and then he dies. 100 years later, he's reincarnated. He becomes the most famous pop music star in the world in 1970s America. But he still kills women. And I walk 5 miles every other day, and I'm thinking 5. I'm just thinking 5. What is 5? 5. It's also my 5th book. So I'm like the number 5, Fievel. Okay, that's the guy's name. So I have 2 books coming out the same day. We could do stuff later this summer or the fall if you want.
Absolutely. No, we'll definitely talk again, Dan. There's so much ground left to cover. So, and you have a podcast too, right? I think
I do. Yeah, I forgot all about that. All right. So it's Live from Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. This Thursday will be Richard Dolan and his wife Tracy Dolan. This will be my 18th podcast. It's on the UNX network, the space UNX space network. If you go there and Google, they have 30 hosts, much more prominent people than me, Whitley Strieber and Peter Robbins among them. And they have fantastic. If you're into paranormal and UFO stuff, go to the UNX network. Mine is called Live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight, every Thursday night live for 1 hour. And it's been a lot of fun, man. That's really been a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Dan Harary, thank you so much, man. It's to spend all this time and go over all this. And like we said, there's so much more that we can cover. So hopefully we can get together again soon and cover some ground that we didn't even get to.
I'd love to. Listen, you're terrific. You're my new best friend. Anything you know, let me know how I can get you more guests, and I'll hit you up with my books when I have them in my hand in case June 10th doesn't happen on the date. But I'd love to do your show again, maybe September or something. And maybe maybe you'll come out to LA and we'll get a pastrami sandwich together.
That sounds really good, actually. Get some deli mustard on there. I think that'll be great.
Absolutely, brother. All right, thanks, Steven. Thanks
Yes,
a lot.
thank you, Dan. Have a good
All
one.
right, take care. Thanks. Bye bye.